Hey everyone, Ali here from Dental and Medical Counsel, and we're going to talk about what should you have in a optometry associate employment agreement. So congratulations, first of all, on being ready to hire an associate. That's a big step in your career. It means big things for the practice. And so that's all very exciting because either your practice is growing and you need an associate to see all those patients, which is great, or you have decided that you're working too hard and you don't want to work 5-6 days a week anymore, but you want to keep the office open. And so you're bringing an associate to help you there, which amazing. That's also incredible. Or third, you're planning on transitioning out and you want an associate and see how that goes, so that you can either sell a partial interest or you're thinking about maybe selling your entire practice to them. So all three are incredible reasons, powerful reasons to bring on an associate. And there are some really great people out there looking for jobs right now. So congratulations on starting this process. What we're going to talk about today is what are the things you need to have in an associate contract when you're thinking of bringing someone on board. Okay, so this is from the employer's perspective. So right off the bat, you're going to be having to make a very, very big decision, which is, do you hire them as an employee or do you hire them as an independent contractor? Now, many of you have seen all the hoopla and fuss about this because Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all these gig economy kind of companies have been suing the state of California. They got various things in state ballots around the country. So there's a lot of noise around it, around the country. And the reality is that the law is changing. A lot of states are moving away from sort of the older rules that pertain to independent contractors and employees, and they're making it a lot harder for you as an employer to hire an associate as an independent contractor. And the federal government passed some laws in 2021 that actually further made that even more difficult to do. So my advice is this: if you are risk averse and you don't necessarily want to go down this road of worrying about being audited by your state agency or by the federal government, then I recommend that you hire your associates as employees versus independent contractors. Now, if you are more, willing to take risk and you are okay with that, then maybe you hire them as an independent contractor. Now, as most of you know, the advantage of hiring someone as an independent contractor versus an employee is that you don't pay for half of their FICA, Medicare, taxes, all those taxes that you pay for all your employees. But from what we hear from optometry, CPAs from around the country is that the real difference is only about 8 to 12%, plus or minus a little bit. If you add, if you provide health insurance or 401k, it might be on the higher end of that scale. If you don't, it might be on the lower end of that scale. So 8 to 10% is definitely, a lot of money, but it's not a game changer, right? I mean, it's, on someone making $100,000 a year, you're talking about $6,000 to maybe $12,000 a year in extra taxes and things that you pay, which is not a small amount of money, but it's also not going to bring your office down. So it's important to think about that in the grand scheme of things, because if you're thinking that it's netting you a ton, then you may want to balance that against the risk of being audited, or more importantly, what's the risk of you staying up late at night worrying about it, right? And so if that's your mentality or if that's your personality, then you certainly don't want to do that. It's not worth it. But that's really the initial decision that you got to make. Are you going to hire them as an independent contractor or an employee? For us, we are now recommending, as because of the rule changes that I was mentioning, that you hire them as employees. In previous years, a lot of times we gave people a lot more leeway and option, and did things to kind of protect you if you were going to hire them as independent contractors. Now, if you're really set on hiring them as an independent contractor, make sure you talk to me or someone like me, because we need to kind of coach you on how to minimize your risk. Of course, there's always going to be risk because you're probably violating the IRS rules and your state tax rules, but we can try to minimize some of that, which is important. All right, after that, you need to really think about payment structure. How are you going to pay them? And so now we're not talking about the amount right now. We're just talking about how you're going to pay them. So what's happening is that a lot of people are paying salaries just to make things easy, which I think is great. You can pay them as a percentage of what they produce or sell in the office, and that's okay as well. It tends to not be as good for the associate if you do it that way, and so salaries are really kind of the more recommended, accepted thing right now in optometry, and we recommend that as well. But setting a salary, and then remember, a lot of times if you're hiring a new grad or someone kind of coming out of school, it's okay to start them with something a little bit more modest and with bonus plans, or more importantly, something more modest with the idea that it's going to grow as they show themselves to be much more experienced or valuable to the team. And that includes the conversations they have with patients. Are they part of the community? Are they trying hard? All those things add to the value of your practice, and so increasing their salary, I think, makes a ton of sense. Then tied to salary are benefits. Now, technically, there's not a lot of benefits that you have to provide as an employer. A lot of benefits are optional, and so that's good news. But there are some benefits that are becoming more mandatory. So one is, for example, sick time. You might be in a state that requires you to provide sick leave, paid sick leave to your employees. In that scenario, then you want to make sure that your employment manual and other things detail that, or in the contract with the associate is detailed, so that it talks about that. So sick leave is one. Another thing is health insurance. Depending on your state and the size of your office, you may have to provide health insurance for your team members. So group health insurance plans are wonderful things right now. The costs have kind of steadily risen, but the way it's been structured with the federal government, it is somewhat more affordable than it used to be before. So it is something to keep in mind. We see that it's the number one benefit that employees want is health insurance, and so just kind of keep that in mind. And then you might also be in a state that is now requiring 401k. 401k plans are becoming more of a required benefit in many states. New York, California, and some other states are starting to require this. Going into 2022, they will be actually mandating it even further to more businesses. And so just kind of keep those things in mind. A lot of times you don't have to contribute to a 401k. You can just set one up. And if you have questions about it, there are some providers that do amazing with that. And there's a lot of out there that just kind of sell you on stuff that have expensive fees. And so give me, shoot me an email or call me, and I can introduce you to someone that we have found to be really good in terms of pricing when it comes to 401k for optometry practices. So just kind of keep that in mind. But those are the kind of benefits that are more generally, that we generally see in optometry offices. You could do other things, of course, paid holidays, more vacation time and things of that nature, especially as employees have more tenure. You can certainly do that as well. Okay, so that's the salary kind of component of it and benefits. Then we go into the job responsibilities of the associate. And this is something that a lot of times is overlooked. What do you want the associate to do? Is it just exams? Do you want them to participate, with the frames and the optician side of things so they can learn that? Where do you want them to be in that process? And so this might seem like an obvious thing to do, but it really isn't. It really isn't. And a lot of times, people forget to give direction to the associates in terms of what they should be doing. And so kind of keep that in mind. Again, tied to that, some semantic stuff. Working hours. What time do you want them to come? What time do you want them to leave? Do you have a morning huddle in the morning? Then, make sure they're there, for the morning huddle if they're going to be part of the team, so you can talk about that day's patients. Again, really, really important. And then the term of the contract, right? How long do you want them to work for? Now, what's natural that people always think about is 1 year. But what I would recommend is that you start, maybe if you don't know the person at all, maybe you start with a shorter amount. Maybe you start with 6 months. And then if everything goes well, then maybe it auto renews for another 6 months or maybe a year. It's important to start kind of dating someone before you get married. And so the same thing kind of applies with an employee. It's important to kind of quote unquote date them for a while, see how they work with, with the patient, see how they are with the staff and the rest of the team, with vendors, with you, see how all that goes. And then depending on that, then you can kind of really build on it and decide, okay, yes, this is the person that I want long term. So that term is important. And then tied to that is the termination language. Now, nobody really thinks about that. It's kind of akin to thinking about divorce when you are getting married. But I think here in this situation, it is important to think about what happens when you need to terminate them. And you could be terminating them for many reasons, right? It could be because they lose their license. It could be because they do something wrong in the office, drugs, alcohol, they speak poorly with the patients, they don't follow your office directions, they're just a bad optometrist. It could be any of those things, or it could be more mundane, right? You figure out that you really don't need an associate, or that you really enjoy working, or you don't have as many patients as you thought you were going to have. There could be a lot of different reasons why you need to let go of someone, as an associate. And so it's important to have that termination language clearly spelled out. How much notice do you need to give them, and how much notice do they need to give you before terminating the agreement, right? Really, really important stuff. And so make sure you have that in there. A lot of times people forget because they don't want to think about it, but it's an important term to have in there. Now, generally speaking, the longer the term, the better for the employer, especially if you want to replace them with another optometrist. And the shorter the term, the better for the employee. But that's not always the case. And so we work with you closely to figure out kind of what your goals are and what your concerns are, and then we kind of figure out exactly what we need to do and what kind of term to put in. All right. Some other things to think about as far as an associate contract for your new associate is, are you going to put in a buy-in clause, right? Are you going to give them the option of buying in after a year or 2 years? For those of you who are later in your careers and you're thinking about that, that might be something to put in. Now, you don't want to put in something that handcuffs you, but you do want to put in language that allows you to have those discussions, and then we can really have some really great discussions about whether or not this is the right person for your office. So think about that. The next thing is non-compete clauses, and there's two kinds of this, right? There's the non-compete where you're preventing them from working, and moonlighting anywhere else while they're working for you. Those are legal in almost every state. So while they're working for you, you can say, I don't want you to work anywhere else or nowhere, in the vicinity of my office. That can be legal. And then there's the non-competes that apply after they leave or after they're terminated, where you say, you can't work within 5 miles of my office. Those tend to be more unlawful in most states. A lot of states say that you can't have it at all. Some states say you can, but it has to be reasonable. And then some states have no restriction whatsoever. And so it's important to keep those in mind and make it very state specific to you, because it could destroy the entire contract if it's unlawful, right? Tied to that is something called anti-solicitation clauses. And that basically means that they can't take your staff away if they leave, they can't take patients away, they can't steal your intellectual property and things of that nature. So again, really, really important to look into that and talk through it with them and make sure it's in the contracts, because a lot of people don't put it in, and then suddenly the doctor leaves and takes their takes the employees with them, or a couple of the employees, or they take their patients, and so again, really important. Try to avoid that if you can. These are the crux of sort of the most important terms that you need to have in an employment contract or an independent contractor agreement when you're hiring an associate. There's a lot more that we talk about and that we go into when the time's right to draw up these documents about intellectual property and other things, of course. But I wanted to give you sort of a very firm footing to stand on, things to think about that you may not have thought about as you kind of start this journey. When you're ready, give us a call and we're happy to walk you through the rest of it and draw up a really strong contract that fulfills your goals, but more importantly, hopefully establishes a really awesome relationship with your new associate, so that they can stay with you a long time or end up buying in, and then you have an exit plan as well. Whatever your goals are, we'll make it happen. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks.